This is what it's all about right here. Take a look at this story from the Daily Mail. Bud Light boycott, I'll drink to that. Poll finds most Americans back Anheuser-Busch snub over its tie-up with Dylan Mulvaney and say corporations give transgender rights too much attention. Take a look at this. Do you support or oppose the boycott of Anheuser-Busch? 37% strongly support, 17% somewhat support. Now, here's the best part. You then have the not sure segment of people is the smallest. You've got 18% strongly opposing it, 12% somewhat opposing it. So you're looking at the majority of people are saying outright, we are in favor of this boycott. And that says a lot.
Yep.
How many people is
it was a survey of 1,000 people, 1,000 adults from Rasmussen. And it found that 54% of people supported it. So Rasmussen actually tends to be decently accurate, I would say, surprisingly not the right word, in this regard. We take a look at like a lot of the election data, and Rasmussen is fairly close in terms of getting the actual results right. So I would agree with this. And just real quick to shout out Jesse Kelly, when he said the first time his neighbors ever asked him about politics was because of Bud Light. So this absolutely lines up.
Can I just point out one flaw in the poll, and this is not a knock on Rasmussen, but don't you have to ask beer drinkers? Because this is asking adults. It's 1,000 adults. And that's the problem we always have with these political polls that come out when they try to push people one way or another. They say, we polled 1,000 adults about Trump. Well, adults aren't registered voters, and registered voters aren't likely voters. And
it's not the best sampling.
It's not the best sampling.
But I disagree. I don't drink, but I'm a beer buyer. We typically would have beer stocked here. We haven't done a little bit, but we would go out to different breweries in the area and we'd pick up cases of beer because we have guests and we have humans like beer, So I think it's fine, just because. And think of it this way too. Let's say, I don't know what percentage of people don't drink beer at all, right? They're going to go out with their friends still, and they're going to be like, "Hey, don't buy that." They're going to support the boycott.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of us don't drink light beer at all.
I tend to not take polls too seriously unless they're huge, but like 1,000 people. I'm just kind of like, eh. And you're right. Maybe none of them drink or ever did and ever will. So like, I don't know. And I want to not make the mistake of wanting to believe a poll that I like just because it's an outcome that I like.
Well, here's the problem with the boycott that we found at Breitbart from day one. You're not going to drink Bud Light. Oh, well, let's look at these other brands. Oh, they're all also owned by Anheuser-Busch. So
InBev,
it's very, very hard to find an alternative if you like that. Now, there are alternatives out there, but I think it brought home to people how few big companies are actually in this market. And that, in turn, brought home the fact that the political agenda that companies are often indulging in has become so universal because there are so many industries where you have this amount of concentrated commercial power that they can change the culture so easily with one ad campaign. Now, I don't know if they succeeded in this one. There's a backlash, but from their perspective, it might actually be a successful marketing campaign because they've raised brand awareness to new heights. People are talking about their beer.
I don't think so. Maybe. But unless they come out with an apology, then it's just very, very negative. I mean, you got Ron DeSantis coming out today. I think it was today. And he said, I'm not going to buy their beer anymore. Why would I? Like, it's just cascading. And normally these stories, they don't last 3 weeks.
Can we get him to ban that beer at Disney World? Then we can put this all in one story.
That's what does it, not the prison. You hear him mention like maybe they need a new prison next to, what is it called? Something Creek? Oh, Reedy Creek or whatever.
Really?
I said they should call the prison the Epcot Correctional Center.
That's great. I initially thought that this was going to be received as an attack on Dylan, and so I was kind of against the idea of boycotting because I was like, people are going to take it as an attack on Dylan. They're going to take it as the right being mean spirited, etc. And I was like, this isn't going to go well. It's going to look bad. And I'm happy to say that it looks like I'm wrong. I think that the general population doesn't feel like they're bullying Dylan. I think they feel like the problem is with Bud, and I think that that's showing in the polls and stuff.
For me, I think my conscience is cleared in that we talk about it as if the beer company got a guy that targets children as his main audience to sponsor beer, which I don't care if you're gay or trans or whatever your sexuality or gender or whatever. I really don't if you're a good person. It's if things like this misalignment where little kids are getting fed beer ads or their favorite influencer is selling beer and they see them drinking it in the tub and they're like 9, like that's where I think they made a huge mistake. And I do not fault Dylan, although for that aspect of it, although I don't like that he, without maybe even realizing it, has kids as his little audience and is selling beer. But I mean, he's in a meteoric rise state right now and probably doesn't have a lot of advisors around him that he can trust.
Ollie London has done some digging and found various posts from Dylan Mulvaney lying. And so the whole thing, in my opinion, is a bit, and more evidence backs it up. Apparently there was an old post. Dylan Mulvaney has deleted some of these old posts. And I think the reason is Dylan tried made a post about being trans and having trouble getting acting work, but then later made a coming out as trans. Also said on the Rosie O'Donnell podcast, whatever show that is, that they just came out publicly for the first time and just started taking hormones in this one video. And then Ollie was like, but if you go back, you can see that Dylan Mulvaney in the podcast, I think Dylan Mulvaney says they were taking estrogen and other pills. But then on TikTok, there's a video where Dylan claims they just started. What I've actually heard from some transgender individuals, they don't believe that Dylan's actually taking any estrogen at all. Based on, Dylan Mulvaney's body and appearance, they think it's not true.
He's too bony.
I don't know about what their reasoning is, but the thing I pointed out the other day is that someone with body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria, or anorexia or whatever, is not going to make a video to 10 million people pointing to the thing that triggers their dysphoria or dysmorphia, like Dylan Mulvaney does.
Yeah, he's so lighthearted and joyful about that he's a woman.
No.
He's a woman. Like,
that he's a man. That he's a man. So my point is this.
He's like, look, I'm a girl.
No.
You'd be like,
that's not what I'm saying. When Dylan Mulvaney made the video pointing to his dick and said, women have bulges, look at it. People with dysphoria don't do that because it gives them dread and anxiety. That's kind of the point. So this is what I was told by a trans woman. She said that Dylan Mulvaney doing that immediately revealed that this person is not trans, because that is like the antithesis of why someone would consider getting surgery to remove that body part. The idea that someone would be driven mentally to the point where they want to amputate their genitals, and then to have someone like Dylan Mulvaney point to it on camera to 10 million people, that's the antithesis of being trans. That's what was told to me. I'm not trans. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just saying, I don't think it makes sense. And so ultimately what it comes down to is I hate talking about the individual, but this is a bigger story in how the algorithm is ruining the minds of children. And it's like you add on all the creepy nonsense they're jamming down children's throats. Young girls getting Tourette syndrome, young girls getting weird surgeries and lip fillers, and now you want them getting drunk? Man, they are really trying to hurt kids.
And I think the real issue here for conservatives is the fact that all this is about kids. And that's obscured by the left deliberately. And by the White House.
Extremely deliberately.
Yeah, no, it's just, I was watching the White House press briefing a day or two ago, and they were talking about how the Republican governors in the red states are passing all these anti-LGBT laws, 400 laws or something like that. And they lump in the LGB with the T, and they make the T all about transgenderism as opposed to kids and having kids exposed to certain things. I think it's depressing, actually, to watch all this rhetoric get thrown around, because none of it gives any credit to conservatives for just caring about kids, rightly or wrongly. I mean, if you agree or disagree or whatever, but you have to at least recognize that the motivation is to protect children, and yet it's being described in exactly the opposite way, that conservatives are the ones, and I like the word used, bullying kids. That's the word that they're using very effectively, that Republicans and conservatives and people who are against all this are the bullies.
There are a lot of stories coming out from detransitioners that are really, really horrifying. Andy No tweeted one and it got deleted. And I guess because the individual posted it started getting too much attention. But you see a lot of these stories from males and females talking about how it was a huge mistake. They were confused kids going through puberty and they were lied to, and now their lives are forever ruined. The crazy thing to me is when you get someone who's, say, 15 years old and then they sterilize that person, they're not going to know what they've lost for a while. And I can't imagine, I just couldn't imagine. I've seen more than enough stories and heard from more than enough people who find out rather accidentally that they're sterile, infertile, or otherwise. And it's always seen as like a very devastating story, like they can't have kids. There's always these tropes about, how about the movie Dogma? The woman says that her husband left her because she found out she couldn't have kids and he didn't want to be with someone who couldn't. That's like a portrayed as a very deeply negative thing. But now all of these young people, they're going to grow up and they're going to be like, yeah, I can't have kids. And in fact, for many of these young people, someone like Jazz Jennings, they can't actually even experience sexual sex at all.
The situation, the more I learn details about Jazz Jennings, the more appalling it sounds. The mother talking about the what's it called? Whatever the expander is, or whatever.
Dilator.
Dilator. That's what. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much more too. Because here's the thing, conservatives don't watch that show, I Am Jazz. No. And I think now people are starting to realize, like, maybe we should watch that, because when this clip went viral showing the mother say that she basically is like abusing Jazz, it's a crazy clip. She says she like hold her down and force this thing into a wound to force the wound to stop healing. It's like, it's crazy. I think then you get conservatives
kid's crying too.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah. And where are we as a society to be like, this has to stop? This is the crazy thing to me.
I'm thinking right now about, I'm still thinking about what we were just talking about. I'm happy to move on if you guys want to, but it's about bullying. You guys brought up bullying because you were saying like the left is claiming that people, the conservative people are bullying the transgender community, but like we're here talking about, no, it's about selling, like twisting kids up when they're young. That's the problem. But I'm looking at Matt Walsh's Twitter from April 17th, and it says, a tweet, this is, to win with this Bud Light situation is when they publicly apologize for promoting transgenderism, which that's not about her. It has nothing to do with kids. He is actually saying he's angry that the concept of transgenderism is being promoted
to kids.
So he didn't say that. He just said in general. Now I'm wondering if a 20-year-old guy, musician, got a Bud Light contract, would anyone even make a noise about it? If his fans were 15-year-olds, I don't think anyone would even care because he's just a regular 21-year-old guy. But it's Dylan Mulvaney with a dress on, so now it's getting a lot of attention.
I absolutely would take issue with a 20-year-old musician selling beer to children.
21, but
or any. I don't care if the guy's 60 years old and for some reason his audience is 15. I think it's a bad thing. The issue is how notable is that individual in the culture war for us to even notice it's happening? Just because I didn't notice a thing doesn't mean I'm okay with it. And this is an argument the left uses all the time where they're like, if you're so concerned about that, what about this? And it's like, wow, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I am also appalled by that. They do this thing where they're like, drag queen story, our conservatives are so mad about this, but I don't see them complaining about children beauty pageants. And it's like, what? It's like 20 years ago, me and my friends were smack talking child beauty pageants as being gross. We'll still do it today. They're just not that big. They're not that prominent. They're not in the national conversation. But I got no problem saying those things are nasty. And I got no problem saying little boys should be going to Hooters as like an appropriate place to get dinner. But that being said, as much as the left likes making that argument, I'm like, dude, women having boobs and a restaurant just having women there is very, very different from having kink shows for children.
So I want to bend this metaphor a little. If a 24-year-old musician with fans that are younger got a Bud Light contract, would anyone blink an eye?
Yes, dude.
But the thing is, you can't quantify the age of the fans. You just don't know.
But we can with TikTok.
We had this debate a little bit over cigarettes, right? They canceled Joe Camel about, 15 years ago because the cartoon image of the camel was thought to appeal to children. And so the maker of those cigarettes, I can't remember which company makes Camel. It's just Camel. They got rid of Joe Camel. And for that reason, because even though it wasn't appearing in children's media, kids were seeing the Joe Camel and thinking, okay, there's this cartoon that they associate with cigarettes.
But let's be real. Like James Bond was a bigger influence in getting kids to smoke than Joe Camel was.
If I was 20, I was an actor.
But seriously.
Yeah. I was an actor in my early 20s. I mean, I'm still an actor, but I was in Hollywood for a lot of that. And if I'd booked a Bud Light commercial at the age of 25 and people went nuts on me because some of my fans were 16 and 17, I would be out of my mind pissed off at them for that.
But that's
leave me. I'm over 21, man. I'm selling beer.
Right. But that's not it. Dylan Mulvaney is on TikTok with 11 million followers. And outside of Dylan Mulvaney, the average TikTok user is 20 years old. That means if you were to take every single person using the platform, which includes adults, it still skews young. And Dylan Mulvaney's audience, at the very least, is underage and should not be drinking. But let's be real. Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, they all know kids who are 18 are drinking. And my personal opinion is that drinking age should be 18 and people shouldn't drink either way. But if you're an adult, you should be allowed to. The point is, Dylan Mulvaney's audience isn't 20 years old. That's the TikTok average. Dylan Mulvaney's audience skews much lower than that and is probably closer to 15.
You know, and even then, I wouldn't blame the guy for having a young audience, and I don't think it's that big. It's that he dressed up as a little girl, Eloise, and did a video a month or so ago pretending to be a little girl.
That's what they
do.
do.
And then he sells beer the next month.
Remember the guy who was the trans little girl? That old guy. Let me pull this thing up.
Oh God!
Yes,
You know, the whole drag queen story hour is also interesting because the whole drag phenomenon has changed as well. There is video of Donald Trump sitting on the couch. I can't remember what talk show it was, but next to Dame Edna. I don't know if you remember Dame Edna. You know, famous drag queen.
Here you go, everybody.
And it was just kind of ordinary, like Rudy Giuliani dressing in drag on Saturday Night Live. And again, it's about adults, and it's not a show meant for kids. But the strip teases and the kink shows, I think, are again, when kids are coming to that or being brought to that, that's what people are objecting to, not drag in general.
Right, and interestingly, even some Democrats don't want drag for anybody. I think it's 8%. We were talking about this the other day. Most Americans, 52%, think drag should just be for adults. A large portion are unsure, and then it's like 24% think anyone should be able to see a drag show, even a child. But those are, of course, Democrats, and a small portion of independents. Yeah, we had this story from a while ago. This is a guy who lives as a 6-year-old girl. Like, sure, whatever, man. I do your thing.
If that guy got a Bud Light contract, I'd be pissed because he's dressing as a 6-year-old.
I actually would not.
Really?
Yeah, no, dude, I don't care. Like, remember Jack Daniels? People were floating the idea of boycotting Jack Daniels because they sponsored RuPaul Drag Race. Nobody cared.
No.
Everyone was like, hey, look what they did. And everyone was like, yeah, I don't really care that much. There was no massive national wave of outrage when people found out about that because RuPaul's Drag Race is a bunch of adults.
Right.
And then you also had Coors Light did a Pride commercial. Some people pointed out that even Yingling has a Pride commercial before. Nobody cares.
There's also a distinction from trans to drag.
Exactly.
There's
the issue is, I think, twofold. The first is that Dylan Mulvaney is, I think, mocking women intentionally, making it, and trans people, and targeting children. But also, let's just be real. Dylan Mulvaney is very annoying to people. And I'm not trying to be mean when I say that. I'm saying people describe Dylan as nails on a chalkboard.
I like him.
What?
He's like a theater guy I would have went to school with, man.
But what I see is, with Dylan Mulvaney, I see TikTok exploiting someone who is clearly unwell. Like the Bud Light commercial, he was just like shaking back and forth and doing these weird motions. Like something's wrong. And normally if we saw someone like on The Price is Right rolling on the floor screaming at the top of their lungs, I'm not kidding. Watch the Price is Right video of Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney, more than one occasion, screams at the top of his lungs. Like, ah! And normally if you saw someone do that, you'd be like, I think this person is in need of some kind of help. He was on Ellen DeGeneres. This dude has clearly got some kind of narcissistic personality disorder. They are feeding this stuff to kids. That is why I'm upset. Now, obviously, Matt Walsh is upset with gender ideology being pushed. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. I mean, he's allowed to be mad and see whatever he wants to see. But I've said this when he talks about Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney does not represent trans people.
Right.
Not in the slightest. It is this weird mockery. It's almost trans face. It's like this dude singing about his bulge is like, come on, man. Like I think the left goes way overboard with a whole bunch of this stuff. I think they lose it when they support people like Dylan Mulvaney. But there is a fair point to be said that there are many trans people who use bathrooms and no one says anything. Like,
no one knows, maybe. I mean,
and no one,
yeah.
exactly. So when you see Dylan Mulvaney putting on this performance, which makes trans people look like psychopaths, to the point where it's easy to attack the entirety of all transgender people, it's like, okay, that's why Dylan Mulvaney is a problem. So I'll put it this way. And always to rope in our good friend Blair White in this one, but it's because Blair White is our friend that I want to bring this up. Blair White's super awesome. and not doing any of this weird, crazy garbage nonsense. There's a whole bunch of individuals, Sarah Higdon, we had on the show, totally rational, reasonable people who aren't rolling on the ground screaming. And then Dylan Mulvaney goes on camera and just becomes a caricature of the most insane depiction of whatever this is. Enough to the point where it's the primary focus of when conservatives are trying to say, like, hey, this is our problem with gender ideology.
Right. Well, how much of that is baiting the conservatives? I mean, they've successfully now involved the whole conservative movement in reacting in outrage to a TikTok character. How much of it is a successful marketing ploy or even a political plan to rile up conservatives using the most egregious example, let's say, of one category of entertainment, and then we go for it, and then Gavin Newsom piles on, and everybody else piles on, and they talk about Republicans bullying people, and suddenly the younger voters are convinced that Republicans are awful people who don't understand social media and don't understand them.
That was my problem with conservatives when I was like in 2005, when I was, hallmark liberal. They were so easy to upset if I made fun of Jesus. I could rile up. So predictable. They were just so overly sensitive, reactionary, just so easy to take control of those people. And it is something people need to work on.
One of the reasons people might be as sensitive about this issue in particular and TikTok is just the degree to which parents watch their kids on devices during the pandemic. And parents are hypersensitive right now to everything that's being fed to kids on social media. There's a huge problem right now of school refusal. Kids who were on their devices for 2 years and now have to go back to school and just simply refuse to sit at a desk and listen to a teacher and participate in class. And so the devices have become much more a part of kids' everyday reality. And I think that might also be driving some of this, not necessarily the transgender stuff, but you've got this person who is influencing kids. Now they're representing an alcoholic beverage or whatever. And parents are freaked out, maybe a little more than usual, because of the degree to which they've seen their kids' lives taken over by devices and social media.
I agree. I have to imagine, and some people watching maybe even have experienced this. One day, you ask your kid, like, what are you looking at? And they're like, oh, Dylan Mulvaney. And they're like, oh, and they look and it's Dylan Mulvaney drinking beer and being like Bud Light. Ooh, and they're like, whoa, man. Like, maybe you shouldn't be on this app if it's some adult guy dressed like a little girl trying to convince you to start drinking booze. Something about that just doesn't seem right. I think a lot of parents that's probably why this reached a level of regular Americans are saying they support a boycott of Anheuser-Busch. Nike, I think another good example of why this is the case is Nike, because people did get mad that Dylan Mulvaney was sponsored by Nike, but that one didn't really go anywhere either because that wasn't targeting children. It was just kind of insulting women, but the women didn't get pissed off enough. Going after kids and telling them to drink and basically insulting March Madness and the core demographic of just like middle-aged white dudes who drink beer. Really, really bad play on this one. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.